The president says she has faith the U.S. will defend the country if attacked. Another leg added to the foreign minister's Europe tour. Are more countries willing to risk Beijing's fury for closer ties with Taiwan? It's usually a time of celebration in Mexico, but does the Day of the Dead hit too close to home in the time of COVID? Millions play it, but billions have never heard of it. A group of junior high students in Taiwan are going to school you on how it's played. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. The threat from China is increasing every day. A warning from Taiwan's president in an exclusive interview with an international news channel. Tsai Ing-wen has told CNN that the nation, which is caught in the middle of two superpowers, can count on Washington's support. Rick Glowett has a story.
In her first interview with international media in nearly 2 years, President Tsai Ing-wen has weighed in on Taiwan's most important friendship. In an exclusive CNN report, Tsai said she had faith the US would come to Taiwan's defense in the event of an attack by China. The Chinese Communist Party claims Taiwan as part of its sovereign territory, despite never having ruled it, and has recently ramped up threats to take it by force.
From his town hall
Last week, in a town hall with CNN, President Joe Biden said the US would come to Taiwan's defense in the event of a China attack. But the White House later walked back his comments, stating there was no change to the US policy to support Taiwan with the means to defend itself.
And by signaling its faith in the US, it also kind of pushes the ball also to the US court, saying, look, President Biden has talked about his commitment. We know this is not an official US policy that has been practiced. It's always been talked about the strategic ambiguity, but it also demonstrates, I think, to a scale that even the top leadership in the US has long kind of viewed Taiwan as a major strategic point and an ally for the US interests in the Asia Pacific, as well as peace and stability in the region.
On Wednesday, at a summit of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, Biden underlined his strategy to engage regional allies to counter China aggression. He called out Chinese coercion and asserted a rock-solid commitment to Taiwan. Taiwan's Foreign Minister, Joseph Wu, on his trip to shore up support in Europe, said the country would rely on itself to counter the China threat.
And under these kinds of circumstances, there are several things we have been doing and we will try to do again and again. The first is to beef up our defense capabilities. We think weakness is inviting aggression, and therefore we want to have the ability to defend ourselves, and we are determined to defend ourselves.
But experts warn speculation over Washington's military commitment and Taiwan's ability to defend itself just plays into China's hands.
What is important is for Taiwan to demonstrate that not just beyond military, but politically, culturally, social, and politically, that it has the ability to continue to defend itself against Chinese aggression, against Chinese narratives of a weak Taiwan that cannot sustain and survive in the foreseeable future.
It's a narrative that Taiwan's president is clearly rejecting with her expression of confidence in Washington. Damon Lin and Rick Glowett for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan is pushing ahead with its diplomatic offensive in Europe, with the foreign minister adding more stops on his tour of the continent. Following meetings in Slovakia and the Czech Republic, Joseph Wu is reportedly heading to Brussels. At the same time, a Taiwan trade delegation is winding up its Eastern European visit. It's received confirmation that Lithuania will be opening a Taipei representative office early next year. As James Chater reports, Beijing is looking to hit back against Taiwan's efforts in Europe.
A medal awarded to Taiwan's foreign minister for what the Czech Senate called his contributions to growing ties between Taiwan and the Eastern European country. It's perhaps the most symbolic event yet in Joseph Wu's trip, which underscores Taiwan's warming relations with the European Union.
And the second is we try to make friends around the world so that Taiwan is not alone. And fortunately, in the last year or so, we have been seeing more and more friends of Taiwan who are willing to speak out on the international stage.
Reports later emerged that Wu would extend his trip to Warsaw and Brussels, with EU officials saying that the trip would be a non-political visit. Wu's European offensive is in tandem with a Taiwanese trade delegation tour, which is wrapping up its 10-day trip to 3 Eastern European states. They have signed memorandum of understandings on a number of key industries, from semiconductors to biomedicine. Analysts say expectations for the European trips should be tempered, but that they are significant nonetheless.
These visits are a clear indication of mutual interest, and I think mutual is important here, because in order to build on stronger EU cooperation, we really need to look at the individual relationships that are being built between Taiwan and these countries.
What started off as a 2-nation Central Europe trip has now been extended to include Warsaw and Brussels. And according to Hong Kong newspaper the South China Morning Post, it's a move that could be reciprocated, with a group of European parliamentarians led by French MEP Raphael Glucksmann visiting Taiwan as early as next week. The Chinese mission in Europe responded with a warning that if it did go ahead, it would undermine the healthy development of China-EU relations. TaiwanPlus reached out to 3 of the MEPs cited in the newspaper's reports, but they did not confirm the trip. In any case, analysts say a broad shift in European perceptions of China is already underway.
But China's wolf warrior diplomacy overall, its pressure against countries, have led, I think, to growing concerns. In the European Union, in particular, the imposition of sanctions on EU parliamentarians just had a very deleterious effect on the way that the governments really view China and its intentions.
On Wednesday, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi set off on his own European tour, which Chinese state media reported was aimed at dissolving misunderstandings between Europe and China. He arrived in Belgrade on Wednesday for talks with the Serbian Prime Minister and will also be visiting Italy, Greece and Albania. The 2 foreign ministers are not expected to cross paths on their offensive to engage European partners. But as ties between Taiwan and Europe continue to warm, all eyes will be on whether Taipei's diplomatic push can deliver tangible results and how Beijing will respond. James Rayner and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
To learn more about the growing international effort to include Taiwan in the UN and other organisations, our reporter Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick spoke to researcher Michael Mazza. He began by asking what other countries can do to help Taiwan.
The United States for years now has supported, what we often call Taiwan's meaningful participation in international organizations. Like-minded partners of allies have issued these calls from time to time as well, but we've essentially seen no progress in recent years. In order to achieve meaningful participation, in order to make progress on perhaps achieving observership or similar arrangements in the United Nations and its subordinate agencies, the United States needs to aim much higher. And in particular, we suggest that the United States should make clear that if China is not prepared to compromise on this question, that Washington will begin a full court press for full membership. That the United States will become very aggressive in making the legal case and the policy case for Taiwan's inclusion in the United Nations. Those cases, in my opinion, are quite substantial, quite strong. That the United States will begin introducing resolutions on an annual basis in order to make this happen. That the United States will begin using leverage it has both over the United Nations via financial contributions, but also leverage it may have in bilateral relationships over voting members in order to wage the battle for Taiwan's full membership. Now, if the United States doesn't start treating this like the national security issue that I believe it is, we're not going to see any progress.
So how have so many people, incredibly educated and experienced people within the United Nations itself, gotten this idea that it does have a one-China policy, but it has taken a side on this dispute?
Kofi Annan in 2003 was the first Secretary General to claim that the United Nations had a one China policy. That phrase, to my knowledge, had never been used by UN officials prior to that time. And that's something that has been repeated from time to time. But the United Nations has never, via a vote in the UN General Assembly or via a vote in the UN Security Council, spoken on how the United Nations should engage with Taiwan. Since China has gotten its foot in the door in the United Nations, it's over decades now built influence within that organization and built leverage within that organization. Chinese diplomats are particularly adept at essentially throwing temper tantrums. Officials within the United Nations and member countries have often decided to walk on their tiptoes when engaging with this issue for fear of invoking that Chinese ire.
The World Trade Organization has confirmed that a committee will convene in early November to discuss issues including China's suspension of imports of some Taiwanese fruits. China banned the island's wax apples and custard apples in September after discovering mealybugs in several shipments of the fruits. It followed a similar block placed on Taiwanese pineapples in February. Taiwan's agriculture minister said that Beijing failed to provide any scientific evidence or official explanation for the suspension, which left Taiwan with no choice but to file its trade concerns with the WTO. 70% of Taiwan's population has now received a first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. However, Taiwan's only locally produced vaccine, Medigen, is struggling to compete with the other available vaccines. Right now, a third of the population is fully vaccinated, but only 6% of them have chosen Medigen. Dr. Lian Jiaen, the head of Medigen's International and Governmental Affairs Division, says that the timing of the rollout had a big impact on vaccine preference.
The low rate that you mentioned has to do with the time sequence of different brands of vaccines made available to Taiwan. By the time we had a peak incidence, there's more disease outbreak, our vaccine is not deployed yet. So people were in a rush to receive whatever that's available to them. So it's actually about the timing and in relationship with the outbreak that's happening. So people's opinion is very, very reactive to the given situation. There are some technology platforms of vaccine that are not really that safe to boost, or it's not really boostable. So in the future, when everyone in Taiwan needs a third shot, or any country that needs a third shot, Medigen could pose itself as one of the good options.
U.S. pharmaceutical company Merck is giving developing countries and poorer nations access to its experimental COVID-19 pill. The antiviral oral medication is yet to be approved by U.S. authorities, but studies have shown that it can halve the rate of hospitalizations and deaths in high-risk COVID patients, according to the company. Merck formed a royalty-free licensing agreement with Medicine's Patent Pool, an UN-backed organization that will facilitate production of the drug in more than 100 low- and middle-income countries where COVID-19 vaccines are in short supply. Coming up after the break, we'll tell you why this travel document is a big win for the non-gender conforming community. Stay with us.
So you觉得山给了你什么？
没有办法用几句简短的话语来带过，但它造就现在的我。
山就是给了一个我们远离世俗的环境，你可以忘记很多事情。
不要怕去探索新的东西吧。
很深沉的去认识一块土地，去认识一个很深邃的自然。
在山的面前，你只会一直感觉到自己很渺小。
每一次都有不同的考验哦。
妈妈表现得怎么样？
很好，十分坚强。
山是
有魔力的地方。
那如果今天不让你爬山，你觉得你会死？
生命肯定会延续下去，但我想心灵有一部分会枯萎掉吧。
湾最有人情味的地方。
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Here's a look at some of the news making world headlines. Israel has taken another step towards expanding settlements in the occupied West Bank, despite harsh public criticism from Washington. Israel's latest plan to build some 3,000 homes is the most significant since US President Joe Biden took office. The US says the move is completely inconsistent with efforts to lower tensions in the region. It is the Biden administration's strongest criticism of Israel's settlement policy to date. The US has issued its first passport with an X gender designation as a third option. It marks a milestone for people who don't identify as male or female in having their rights recognized. Intersex activist Dana Zim, who has been fighting in court for years, was the first to receive the new passport.
Legal recognition for me and my community. Legal recognition means we have status as a human being instead of an issue.
An Australian football player says he has been overwhelmed by support after coming out as gay.
I'm Josh Cavallo. I'm a footballer and I'm proud to be gay.
Adelaide United defender Josh Cavallo became the first player in the country's top league to come out while still playing. He made his sexuality public in a video posted on social media, saying he was tired of living a double life. Cavallo said he had hidden his sexuality because he thought people would treat him differently if he came out. But the player said he was overjoyed by the immense backing from his teammate and coaches. More than 250,000 people who have died from COVID-19 in Mexico. It's a figure that weighs heavily in the run-up to this year's Day of the Dead, which begins on November 1st. Photographer Marisol Mayo-Villa and her family are mourning the loss of her uncle.
Desafortunadamente yo creo que muchas familias este año pues van a sumar muchas fotitos ahí a su altar porque por todas las pérdidas que tuvimos a raíz de esta pandemia por COVID-19. Entonces yo creo que es el recuerdo y el honrarlos de una manera muy bonita. Creo que eso es lo que mantiene vivo aquí esta tradición.
The annual celebration has its roots in indigenous Mayan and Aztec rituals, but has also become part of the Catholic tradition in Mexico. Despite the many skulls on display and the focus on death, the festivities are a light-hearted affair meant to remember and honour those who have already left us. Sepak takraw may well be the most popular sport you've never heard of. Played by millions of people throughout Southeast Asia, it is now gaining ground in Taiwan. Ken Ning takes you to the junior high school which swept the nationwide Sepak takraw championships last weekend.
You can kick it, you can throw it, but chances are, unless you're from Southeast Asia, you've never heard of it. Sepak takraw is a sport that is as popular as football in Thailand, Myanmar, Indonesia, and Malaysia. But in Taiwan, it's still finding its feet. It's already an event at the Asian Games, and the organization tasked with promoting Sepak takraw in Taiwan is looking to create a team capable of going for gold.
This sport is still new to Taiwanese, and we believe that it has good chances of winning medals in the future.
Thanks to a government-backed initiative, the country's young athletes are getting a chance to develop their skills. One of the nation's top teams is from Shiling Junior High School in Taipei. But the students face a battle not only on the court, but also off it, as they struggle to raise awareness of the sport.
其实藤球运动在台湾算是一个很新兴的一个运动了，因为毕竟进来的时间很短。那时候你看没有选手，没有教练，什么都没有，从零开始。
It's been described as volleyball, but for your feet. So how do you play it? I'm at Shilin Junior High School, and their champion Sipata Crawl team is going to show me how. Thank you. Hey. For me, it's so hard to just keep the ball in the air without letting the ball onto the ground. It's just so frustrating. But these kids from Shilin Junior High School, they are really nailing it. I sat down with some of the kids to talk about and find out what they think about Sipata Crawl. Here's what they told me.
I like Sipata Crawl very much. When I graduated from elementary school, I decided to go to Shilin Junior High School because I can play Sipata Crawl here.
I think this sport is very cool. It's not easy to control the ball on the ground with your feet, let alone you need to do backflip and kill the ball in the air.
Sepak is a kind of volleyball but kicked with feet. The rules are very similar to volleyball, but the menu is a badminton court, and the basic skill is related to soccer. So you can say it is a combination of volleyball, badminton, and soccer.
The man who coaches these students onto success is a guy that people refer to as the Captain Taiwan of Sipata Crawl.
Hello everybody, and hello reporter. I'm Zhang Yuting, and I come from the Taipei. I grew up in the Taipei all long time, and I was first see the Sipata Crawl. It was amazing, you know. I see in the Asian game. I remember it's 2002 in the Busan, yeah. I shocked. I very shocked. Incredible. I can believe body can do, you know.
Acrobatics.
I call a rolling attack.
The first time John watched a Sipata Crawl match was at the 2002 Asian Games in Busan, South Korea. He was instantly drawn to the sport. 6 years later, he gotten so good that he decided to go pro. He saved up all his money and flew to Thailand to train. And while he was there, he discovered something that inspired him.
那其实就是我们每天跑步的时候，我都会看到他。那其实我就有在心中埋下一个种子，就是我希望有一天，我要让这个奥会的会旗升上，是那种感觉比较深，所以很累，然后身体很酸，他就是会支持着我。
But John never made it to the Olympics. Sipata Crawl is still not an officially recognized sport of the Games. Although John's days of competing at the highest level are behind him, he's now doing all he can to train the next generation of Sipata Crawl players in Taiwan.
我说就算教练去递茶水、递毛巾，我都很愿意，因为那就是运动员追求的梦想。不管是奥运也好，或是亚运也好，就是运动员只要站上那个属于自己的舞台，我觉得就是活的就是很有价值。
Last weekend, the efforts of Coach Zhan and his athletes paid off. The Shilin Junior High School boys and girls teams swept the nationwide Sipata Crawl championships in their age group. Perhaps one day, these students will head to the Asian Games, or if the sport gets recognition, they may even find themselves at the Olympics. Klein Wong, James Rayner, and Ken Ning for TaiwanPlus.
Chinese cities have held celebrations marking 100 days until the start of the Beijing Winter Olympics. The designs for the Olympic medals were unveiled in the northern provinces of Heilongjiang and Jilin. Beijing will become the first city to have hosted both the Summer and Winter Games when the event gets underway in February of next year. But no international spectators will be allowed to attend, and participants will have to undergo daily COVID tests. China's human rights record has left the Games further mired in controversy, with a number of groups calling for a boycott of the event. Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. We leave you with some images of a group of 150 vicunas arriving at a repopulating centre in Peru. Check out the TaiwanPlus News app, YouTube and website for this show and more. Stay safe and see you next time.